Most of us depend on what people say about themselves and what they tell us about themselves to determine if they're a kind of person we want to spend time with. We listen to them. And listening to them is the least effective way of determining someone's intention, someone's dedication, someone's honesty, and someone's trustworthiness. So how do we determine if someone's being honest? How can we catch a lie? And how can we catch those red flags sooner than later? If you're interested in understanding that and beginning to employ a powerful position in life and knowing things quicker than later, you don't want to miss this video. Welcome back, friends. I'm glad to be back today. And today I'm going to be talking about those nonverbal cues, right? A lot of times we listen to what people tell us about themselves. We listen to what they say about who they are and what they're about. But something might change, and in the end, we realize that they didn't have the good intention, or they didn't have the dedication, or they weren't being honest. So how do we determine honesty quickly? How do we decode? Is there a decoding system that we can use instead of just listening to what they tell us? Sure. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about those personal power abilities that you can use to understand, to determine good decisions and make good decisions, to determine who's a good friend, who you should go into business with, and even for that matter, who you should date. So you ready to talk about this stuff? Let's go. So we want to be paying attention to those non-speaking parts, right? That's important. So in today's video, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. And we're going to start very simply, but as you understand, we're building up. You can't just take one part and not do the rest of it, right? We have to do it all at one time. So we got to be completely engaged. We got to be completely in the moment, and we have to be mindful, right? Because we can just listen to somebody talk and we can kind of just, daydream. But this actually takes time and it takes work. And if you can start establishing this in your day-to-day life, you're going to see the red flags quicker. You're going to outsmart people, okay? And you're going to be least taken advantage of, okay? So I want to help you be able to overcome those situations, because when we get taken advantage of or we get lied to, it's not a fun experience, right? So I'm trying to help you overcome that so you don't have to deal with that stuff in the future. Okay, the first thing that I want you to be mindful of is the way that they carry themselves. How do they walk into the room? How do they present themselves? Are they all put together? Do they seem to, feel good in their own skin? You can tell when somebody's happy in being in their own skin because, they look like they're happy. They look like they feel good, and they look like they don't feel like a fish out of water, right? On the other side, do they look disheveled? Do they look kind of thrown together? Do they seem to mope into a room? These are things that you can get an understanding of someone's personal feelings about themselves, how much they really care about themselves and how much time they really spend on, personal hygiene, personal health, and personal self-care. The next thing that I want you to pay attention to is the way that they look at you when they're talking, okay? When they are talking, are they looking into your eyes, right? Are they locked into your eyes? Is it a little too much, a little too little? Do they seem to be talking and looking over your head? Do they seem to be looking down, looking off to the side? Okay, all very interesting. Now, when somebody's not looking in your eyes, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily lying. Okay, I know that I've read a lot of things online and they're like, if they're hiding their hands, they're lying. If they're not looking in your eyes, they're lying. It's not always true, okay? Some things you have to really, really pay attention to, because sometimes they might be looking right into your eyes and sometimes not. That can also mean that, one, they believe in what they're talking about, or they don't believe in what they're talking about, or they feel uncomfortable or insecure about what they're talking about, or they even feel maybe insecure about their own abilities. Okay, so there's a lot of things that go into this. So the idea of them just lying automatically because they're not looking you dead in the eye, that's not true. Another thing that I want you to pay attention to is how do they look when you're talking to them? Okay, and that's interesting too, because when you see people's cues, facial expressions, how much they're really paying attention. Are they really paying attention to what you have to say? Or are they kind of looking all over? Are they fidgeting? What's happening there? Because that can also put into consideration how much they're listening, right? How mindful they are, and really how engaged they are in the conversation. The next thing that I want you to observe is how they treat the other people around you. Okay, let's take, for example, that you're in a restaurant. How do they speak to the waitstaff? When somebody's serving water, how do they respond? Do they say thank you? Do they not say anything? Do they almost act like when the waitstaff comes that they're interrupting? Do they kind of shun them? How do they respond? Because when you're dealing with somebody that you either want to hire, right? You want to be a friend with, or you possibly want to date, you want to be around someone that's pretty open, right? Somebody that cares about other people and shows it, not just putting an act on for you. And what I've found is that when people treat waitstaff rudely, okay, when they do this, this is a big sign of the way they treat other people. It's a very narcissistic sign as well. Okay, it's saying, I'm better than you because you're serving me at a restaurant. Okay, they might not think that consciously, but subconsciously they're acting like that. So I really want you to think about that, because you don't want somebody just putting on an air or an act to get you to feel comfortable around them. All these small things that are done on the side, those are the things you really need to be paying attention to, because it really shows you the true intent of the individual at the core, especially the way they respond to people that they see is not being important to their life. The next thing that I want you to be aware of is, are they sitting still or are they fidgeting? Okay. When you ask them a question, do they sit still and answer it, or do they fidget as they're answering the question? So there's lots of things to take into consideration. Your eyes and ears, right, have to be open. Okay, so when you're paying attention to this, obviously if somebody's fidgeting, okay, especially if you've been there for a really long time, they could just have attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyper disorder. They're tired of sitting there. They've been sitting there too long. They're ready to go. Okay, that's definitely one caveat. Okay, but if this is just, you've been in the conversation for a few minutes or maybe 20, 30 minutes, if you're asking a question and somebody's fidgeting or fidgeting when they're trying to answer, that means that they don't really feel comfortable with the answer they're presenting, or they're worried that you're going to accept the answer, right? They also might be questioning the validity of the answer that they've given. Okay, so being somebody that's fidgeting like that, it's something to really pay attention to. Now, I'm a person that if you sit me in a meeting for 2 hours, I'm going to eventually start fidgeting because I need to get up and move around, okay? That's a totally different scenario. So remember, too, if you're mindful of a meeting and you really want to get to know what somebody's about, you know, small incremental meetings can be very powerful because you see somebody at different situations at different times of the day more often. So eventually, if they're hiding something, they're going to eventually blow their cover. Okay, so thinking about that is pretty important. The next nonverbal cue that I want you to pay attention to is when they're not talking and you're talking, right, in the conversation. What do their facial expressions look like? Very interesting. Because you can get a lot out of somebody, the way that they're interpreting what you're saying, okay? The way that they're listening, how intently are they listening? It was interesting. I want to give an example. Years ago, I was in a conversation with somebody that I was about to hire, or at least I thought I was, and I didn't hire them. But every time I would speak, they would make this really wild, contorted look on their face, and it was like a frown kind of mixed up in something else. I can't even explain it. But I finally realized I had to tell this person that they look this way when I was speaking. And I brought it up and I said, do you understand how you look when I'm speaking to you? And I think you probably look this way with every single person that's talking to you. And I said, just look in the mirror and pay attention to the way that that looks. It was so contorted. It was almost like everything I said, this person like wanted to kill me for it. Okay, like they had a problem with everything I was saying. Well, it was funny because that same person came back to me a few weeks later. They were a little kind of weirded out that I had brought that up, but they said, you know what, I've realized it. I've realized that the way that my facial expression goes when somebody's talking to me was across the board the same. And I was wondering why people didn't want to spend large amounts of time with me or didn't want to have those conversations with me because they thought I was judging them the whole time, and I wasn't. Okay? So I want you to think about that. When somebody is looking at you a certain way, is it because they agree with what you're saying? They disagree with what you're saying? What's going on? Or are they completely mindless in the fact that they don't realize how they're projecting themselves, okay? And that's something to think about too, because in order to be a master of our life, we have to know how we are projecting ourselves, how we come into a room, how we look, how we present ourselves. And we're not talking about being fake. But in order to really master who we are, we have to master our emotions, our feelings, and be honest. And so when you're catching these little nonverbal cues, it can really show you someone's intent. And it can also show you if somebody's mindful or not mindful. And it can also show you how important what they're saying to you is and how believable they believe it to be true. Okay, so these are things that you want to think about. In the next video, I'm going to explain a technique that I started using over 15 years ago. Okay, and it's awesome. And it helps you to understand people's intent and trustworthiness, and you can start practicing in a place that you would never think you could practice in. And if you practice that way, you can do it anytime with anybody. So I'm going to be explaining that in the next video. And in the meantime, please like this video and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And, share this with your friends, your family, some of your coworkers, right? And if you have a technique that you use to really get to the core of somebody and to really feel them out, put that in the comment section below, because I definitely just wanted to touch on some things. I didn't want to make this video long and intense, but I wanted to begin this conversation. And so I'm looking forward to getting some of the information that you can share with our community as well that has helped you to dodge a bullet, to overcome those red flags, and to jump out of something before you get hurt or taken advantage of. Hope this video has helped you, and don't forget to live your true life.